We are very happy to have with us this afternoon a very stellar group of experts. Rebecca Busansky, who is the Executive Director of the Berkshire Agricultural Ventures, or BAV, will offer an overview of the issues that face growers and restaurateurs here in the Northwest Corner and the Berkshires. Rebecca has had a 30-plus year career in community economic development in New York City and Massachusetts. At the Franklin County Community Development Corporation, in an earlier job, Rebecca created the PV Grows Investment Fund that helps farm entrepreneurs in Western Massachusetts. And she also created the Mass Food Trust Program that helps food entrepreneurs serve low-income areas with few grocery stores, known as food deserts, as we heard in the film. And she is going to moderate a panel of 3 other people, including Dan Carr, who is the Outreach and Technical Assistance Manager at BAV and owner of his family farm, Beavertides Farm in Falls Village. Amanda Freund is a 3rd-generation farmer at Freund's farm in East Canaan, Connecticut. And there she manages the farm's CowPots business. And last but not least, we have Peter Platt, who is the chef and owner of the Old Inn on the Green and the Southfield store in New Marlborough, Mass. He got to know and love the Berkshires while he was a student at Williams College and learned his craft, his chef craft, at Cordon Bleu in London and at several notable restaurants, including the Parker House Hotel in Boston. He and his wife purchased the Old Inn on the Green in 2003 with a menu that focuses on locally grown food. So please join me in welcoming the panel to the stage.
Good afternoon, everyone. I just want to start and thank the Salisbury Forum for having us here and showing this film today. I think it's a really important film to watch, and it's really great to be able to have a conversation with such a great group here about these important issues. So Berkshire Agricultural Ventures works with farms and food businesses on strengthening their businesses and the local food shed. And we work in Litchfield County, Connecticut, Berkshire County, Massachusetts, and Columbia and Dutchess County, New York, what we call the Berkshire Taconic region. And I think one of the reasons this film really spoke to me is how it really uplifts these important national issues and challenges in the food system that really accurately mirror what's happening here in the Berkshire Taconic region. And I'm hoping that in this discussion we can get into those issues and how we are really, BAV is really doing work on the ground to really try to improve that situation. And I'm glad that there was so much interest in joining in on this conversation. So I was going to start with just a couple of quotes from the beginning of the movie that I thought were really interesting, and you'll have to pardon me as I switch from taking on and on my glasses. But and I want to give a shout out, of course, to Ruth Rachel, who I think is incredible to really, help create this documentary and really be that voice in all of this work. But it sort of starts off with COVID was the wake-up call. We take farming and the people behind it for granted. And I think this is movie, in a lot of ways, this film is really a timepiece, right, of that first year and a half during the pandemic. And I don't know about all of you, but it certainly brought me back to that moment in time. And here we are almost on the cusp, really at 5 years after the start of the pandemic. And I'm just curious, like, what do we think? Is there a new normal? Have we pivoted? Have things changed? Have they not? And so that was the question I wanted to kick it off with. Dan, do you want to give that?
Yeah, well, I think it woke up a lot of things in us during the pandemic and in the food system. Meat processing in particular. And I think it woke us up to a certain degree. I don't know that we've moved far enough away from the consolidation in the meat processing industry. Also, when it comes to just when systems break down, being able to have local food systems we believe strongly in the New England food vision, trying to get 30% of our food being produced in New England that we're actually consuming in New England. We're quite a long ways from that at this point, but I think that whole period really woke that up in us. I also just want to point out a couple local things that really came out of the pandemic. I feel like the Northwest Connecticut Food Hub saw a big jump in growth, and also in the Berkshires we saw all these different food system level things like the Solidarity Gardens and places like that, where we saw a lot of new things emerge.
So I have the unique exposure to 3 different businesses on one farm property. So there's a dairy farm, which is a commercial dairy farm. The product is sold as a commodity product. We're CowPots, where we're the singular producer of this unique alternative for gardening products. And then there's a retail farm market and garden center. And so the pandemic was absolutely a beautiful example and representation of why diversification on a farm operation is so critical, because it affected each of those 3 businesses in such completely different ways. The milk market tanked. We went from making $20 per 100 pounds of milk to $12 per 100 pounds of milk. We were losing money with every drop of milk that was getting picked up each day, but you don't just turn cows off. Just like Bob at the Chef's Garden, I mean, they're having to start those seeds a season ahead. But so, post-pandemic, that's not a real thing. 5 years into this pandemic, Freund's Farm Market became a place that a lot more people relied on for prepared foods. So such that we did an expansion on our commercial kitchen this past spring, because that's where the demand was. With CowPots, we saw an incredible upsurge in interest in our product because, 1, people were stuck at home and had nothing else to do, but 2, there was some major supply chain issues. Beyond the food system, we couldn't get cargo ships bringing in product from China like we used to. And so I'm probably going to highlight an upcoming topic, but I'm now thinking about the prospect of tariffs and how that's going to affect, is there going to be a sudden resurgence in demand for our product because it is becoming more expensive to come from other places. But whether or not the systems to better handle milk as a commodity, I don't know that I've seen firsthand any real change. And to the point that was made in this film, it wasn't for lack of product. People were going to the grocery store and not seeing milk there, not because there weren't cows that are being milked, but it's because the processing facilities couldn't accommodate that pivot to be able to go from producing milk for commercial use to milk that was meant to be, accessible for your standard grocery store. So has the food system shifted to accommodate that better? Probably not. So there continues to be opportunity.
Oh, okay. I got my own, I think. When, for us, the pandemic didn't really change a lot of what we did as a business. I mean, we were able to stay open the whole time. We just cooked food a different way. We did delivery, we did takeout. The Southfield store where we do sandwiches and coffee got busier than it ever had been, just by doing takeout. We kept all our employees, at least all the employees that wanted to stay at work, and we didn't have to lay anybody off. So it was smooth. Everyone chipped in. I think in the Berkshires there wasn't a lot of COVID in the area anyway, so no one was getting sick, and we all pitched in, and that went on for however many months. And then when we reopened, we had all our employees still working, so we were able to sort of hit the ground running. And I think the government assistance was helpful, and it gave us money to buy a tent and have more outdoor seating. We own our property, so our lead bank people were very helpful. We didn't have to pay our mortgage for a few months, and everyone was really supportive. I thought our customers, they tipped great. They made a point of coming to our restaurant, and of course we were the only one of the few places open, but we stuck with it, and it paid off. So it was a really positive experience for our business and our employees, I think, because we all pitched in and we all made it work, and we all put our heads together to keep going. In the years since, it's changed our restaurant a lot because we pay everyone a lot more. We provide more benefits. We raise our prices. It's always a struggle where the prices land and where the salaries land, and a lot of our other costs that people don't see are just through the roof. Our insurance is just crazy, and so many different things that it takes to money-wise to make that business work. So we're still working it out. We have been for 20 years. It's always a struggle, but we're in the hospitality business, and I think people get their joy when they work with us to provide service, to our guests. So that keeps us all on the same page, I think. So anyway.
Thanks. So I think this movie really talks about the importance of food systems, regionalized food systems, about policies, national policies, local policies, and we certainly are at a certain political moment in time, and I don't want to shy away from it. I think it's a moment to kind of lean in and really think about what policies, what structural changes do you think we need to see in our local food system? What can we do locally as a county, as a state, as a region, to really kind of make progress in creating a stronger local food shed?
Well, like I started to mention before, I really feel like in the meat processing industry, we started to see for the first time some movement at breaking up some of the consolidation. I mean, still, a solid 80 to 90% of the meat that's consumed in America is, coming from the big four: Tyson, JBS, National Beef, and Cargill. But for the first time, that was being called into question, and there was, it's a very slow process to turn. It's like turning around an ocean liner, right? But we started to see real investment in small processors coming out of the federal government, and we saw a lot of local interest and the state government as well. Connecticut has really invested a lot. New York State had grant programs trying to fund small abattoirs, small meat processors and butchers. And it takes time for those to strengthen and for new folks to come online. It's not an overnight switch, but I saw real progress. I was really excited. To be honest, the day after the election, I was hearing murmurs of the next Secretary of Ag potentially being Thomas Massey, and it's somebody that I may not agree with on a lot of things, but when it comes to meat processing, I agree a lot with Thomas Massey. He really focuses on this, the building up the small processors. Unfortunately, we didn't get him. We got Brooke Rollins, who's an industry insider. So we're really going to see how that all plays out in the long run.
I'm going to echo a few sentiments that were already shared. One, like Karen Washington said, land access, 100%. Here in the Northeast and in Connecticut, the property values make it impossible. I'm a generational farmer, and I'm proud of what that stands for my family and the land base that we're on, but I also know that it is an incredible privilege that so many people that aspire to be involved in this industry do not have. And so there are ways that you can actually be part of supporting a shift or a change. Right now in the state legislature, there is discussion on policy for option to purchase at agricultural value, which would be a huge lever that new and beginning farmers could access farmland. So don't discount, if you're not involved in farming, your inability to participate in the process that supports farmers accessing one of the most critical tools, which is land. The second item, which Bob Jones referenced, was immigration. That policy is so far gone and broken in this country. Tomorrow there's actually going to be a planned day of protest where immigrants all over this country are not going to show up to work to try to demonstrate how impactful they are in our food system. But it's not something that has been able to get any real meaningful attention for decades. But like Bob said, if those immigrants aren't in this country doing the work to produce our food, they will be in a different country doing that, and we will be importing our food. The American society has not nurtured a lot of people that want to be field workers, and we rely heavily on those immigrants. And then the third thing is profit cannot be a dirty word in farming. It a lot of times is. Yes, farming is a lifestyle, absolutely, but it also has to be a sustainable business. So if farmers aren't economically sustainable, they're not going to be in it for very long.
Well, being a restaurant owner and a chef, I have a little bit different background in terms of, my relationship with farms. Right now, I'm the vice president of Berkshire Grown, an organization that's a buy local organization in the Berkshires. And I've been a board member for over 20 years. And when we started out, we were trying to create that sort of good connection between farmers and chefs, and encouraging chefs to buy from local farms. And then the sort of local farm to table movement kicked in, and that's not really our focus anymore. Now it's more food access and supporting farmers in a bunch of other ways. So I think for us, for chef and an owner, and it's getting involved in organizations like BAB and Berkshire Grown to support them, because they really do meaningful support for local farmers, whether it's buying their food and donating it to food pantries and things like that. That's the best way that I see now, apart from just buying as much local food as you can, whether you're a restaurant owner or you're a private consumer.
That's great, thank you. And I'll just add, and I think Dan was maybe being a little bit modest there, but BAV does do a lot of work that Dan really helped launch around the local meat processing value chain, and that's a really important part. We've worked with a number of small meat processors doing very intensive business technical assistance to help them improve their business flow, take in more animals, because we know the positive impact that has on our local livestock farmers. And livestock farming in the Berkshire Taconic region makes up about half of our farmers, our livestock farmers, just to give you a sense of what an important part of our food system, our farm system, our farmers, that is. And with that has come, we do low interest loans, we do business technical assistance, and to Peter's point, we also run a market match fund where we support Berkshire area farmers markets, and we match SNAP dollars an additional $30 for low-income shoppers to use at farmers markets, along with the great work that Berkshire Grown does on food access work as well. So these are, important. We all provide, there's a lot of scaffolding out there for farmers to really help speak to that issue of additional, helping them really build and support their finances. And I'll also throw in that Amanda is on our board, so. So I think, Karen Washington and some of the other, speakers really shined a light on the kind of food justice issues that were faced in America, and again, that are really very similar here in the Berkshire Taconic region. And I was also struck by a couple quotes where they talk about black farmers went from about 14% 100 years ago, and they're now they make up under 2% of the farmers in America today, as well as the landowning issue, the amount of African American farmland that was lost since the 1950s, around the 1950s. And I think that really are really important points. And I think, Amanda, you kind of were nodding towards that when you talk about farm access, capital, all of those issues. And I was just wondering if, to get a sense of your take, I know that Connecticut has been the Connecticut Department of Agriculture has been doing a huge effort to launch a whole land, capital, access, and markets program for historically disadvantaged farmers that they've just recently gotten off the ground, which is pretty exciting, I think, and hopefully gonna make a difference.
Well, and hopefully, federal funds don't stop because we include the term DEI. But I think it's important that we continue to support the underserved farmers across our region. We have a few great resources locally. Rocksteady Farm, Maggie, Dee, Kyle, Rika, they're a cooperatively owned farm. They're a wonderful resource. They're a wonderful resource for food, but they're also a wonderful educational resource as well. They've done a lot to train new farmers, beginning farmers, particularly LGBTQ plus folks or BIPOC folks. And they're actually hosting a series of workshops in March for landowners. And I would highly encourage folks. It's a collaboration between them and the Duchess Land Conservancy. So you can sign up for it at the Duchess Land Conservancy's website. But it's to actually help educate folks and just start to learn about what it's like to host farmers, especially underserved farmers, on your land. I appreciate Amanda highlighting that before, because here in Connecticut, we have the second most expensive farmland in the country behind New Jersey. There's real danger of land just going out of farming altogether, just because it's just folks. Some of our best farmers, when they look at their options to buy land here in Connecticut, and then they look to New York, it makes a lot of sense to move on to New York oftentimes. But we just like this movie highlighted, we need our own local food system. We need our own local food economies.
I don't have a lot of wonderful wisdom or insight to share here, because as a third generation dairy farmer, every meeting I ever went to was a sea of old white men. But I will say that I think it's going to require community to make it happen. It's going to require intentional, active projects and programs. And I think, I guess the closest thing I have to making any meaningful contribution to this question, there's Connecticut Grown for Connecticut Kids grants that have been utilized for a lot of different opportunities, whether it's bringing Connecticut grown products into schools or getting kids out of schools on the farms. And so last year we hosted 300 third graders from Naugatuck to come and do a trip of our farm, and it was a much more diverse group of third graders than we get from North Canaan Elementary School. But I think such a big part of the building a future food system that we can be really proud of is introducing the idea that this is an opportunity for a space and place that anybody can feel welcome. Like was addressed, farmers and the farming community tend to be pretty conservative If not politically, then definitely socially. And so just to make it an inviting space for someone who's not, white bread is really an important part for the farmers as much as the service providers. So it's much my responsibility to make sure that I am leaving that door open as a landowner or a bank lender or anybody else.
Oh yeah, Dan also reminded me another really great resource for trainings for farmers of color is Soulfire Farm, which is in New York State nearby.
And trainings for the public too.
Yeah.
They have online trainings called Uprooting Racism in the Food System. Everybody on BAB's staff and board has gone through that, one-day training, and I found it incredibly enlightening.
Yeah. Great. So, I'm not sure how much time we have. I'm good. Okay, great. Just checking in. I think there was so much rich information about meat processing, livestock farming, and again, we're a number of years out from the pandemic, but I know that we were talking, and the four of us met earlier this week, and talking about avian bird flu, and that it's hard not to think about that in this time of climate change and just what it's going to do to poultry processors, what it's doing to shoppers in terms of egg prices and chicken prices. And I just want to know if you had anything to add to that.
Well, one thing you may notice is the egg prices already have gone up pretty significantly, but you may also notice what's happened to the local egg prices. They haven't gone up, right? Because, that's something I really saw in the pandemic as well, was when the Big Four was price gouging the heck out of us, when the meat prices went through the roof, but then they went a little further and gouged. You didn't see local farmers raising their prices, because that's what when you're buying from your neighbor, or you're buying from a local farmer, it's something very different. I had a nice conversation with Anna Houston on Friday, who's off-the-shelf eggs up in Great Barrington, and I asked her, are you guys thinking of raising your prices at all? And she said, now I can't, because people are really struggling to get eggs. I actually should have. My grain prices went up so much in the last year. I wish I would have raised them a while back, but now I can't do that to people, and you don't see that in the big consolidated industry. And, the next thing to watch is what it does to dairy prices, because avian influenza is also going to affect dairy quite a lot.
So I'll just say that I think there's always going to be a really extreme variable. It was nice when it was just COVID, or it was just climate change, or if it were just avian influenza. But there's this merging of a lot of different catastrophes all happening together. But I think it really says a lot for the perseverance of the fact that we still can go into that grocery store and, fill our carts and at an incredibly reasonable price, even though there's a lot of talk on the news about increasing food prices. When I was a senior in high school and I was an FFA member, I remember going to Stop and Shop with my blue and gold jacket on the middle of February, so literally like 10 to 14 days from now, and we stood there to talk to consumers about the fact that this is National Checkout Day. This is the day that in the United States you've earned enough money, you've made enough income to pay for your groceries for the full year. I was also a Peace Corps volunteer in Zambia, where 90% of what the families that lived next to me made went towards feeding their family, full stop. They didn't have money for school fees and uniforms and cooking oil. So we're incredibly blessed and privileged here, although we have a lot of problems. But what an incredible opportunity to in 6 weeks of a 52-week year have made enough income to pay for what the average grocery bill will be for the year. So increased pricing is obviously gets a lot of attention and sound bites on the news, but the reality for what the rest of the world pays for their food is I think an important thing to keep in mind. But it's very scary. I mean, there's the fact that avian influenza has, in the past year been able to actually be detectable in cows and milk. I mean, that's terrifying. There's a lot of unknowns. But I will just make a pitch for pasteurization. I strongly recommend continue to consume lots of dairy. Just make sure it's pasteurized.
Peter, did you want to add to that?
Not
From your perspective?
Other than that, we buy off-the-shelf eggs, and I have noticed that the price hasn't gone up. And I guess personally and just professionally, it's hard to keep the things like the bird flu, front of mind when there's so many other things going on that you have to worry about every day. You see it in the paper and you look at it, and just it's not a thing yet for us. I think, but
Yeah.
it will be. I think.
Yeah. I also want to touch on, climate change and the climate crisis and what an important part of farmers' lives that is. And I thought it was really pretty incredible to learn about Will Harris and all that he is doing on his farm. And I know that Dan, as a farmer, actually, you also employ a lot of those techniques on, grazing, et cetera, that really carbon sequestration. So I just thought maybe if you want to just talk a little bit about what you do on your farm.
Yeah.
Similar.
Well, Will's long been a big hero of mine. I met him back in 2014 at the American Pasture Poultry Producers Association gathering, and I actually got to know him a little bit. I hired one of his past employees and spoke to him on the phone a few different times. I think the world of him, and when he was talking about just how he's reinvigorated the biology of his farm, and you can see the way how ingrained it is in him as a person. He's he got emotional talking about how he's really getting to live his dream as a land steward. But yeah, we similarly we use holistic management practices where we're moving our animals every single day to have a really large impact in the short term and then allow for a long rest period. And that's how you really build carbon in your soil. When you let the plants fully recover and allow the biology to do its magic. So, yeah.
Thanks. And I'll just add that at BAV, we have a strategic program area built around climate change, and again, working with livestock farmers to employ a lot of those practices, which is really great. So I have two closing questions. One, I think, Will Harris and Steve Stratford really shine a light on the ripple effect of our farmers going out of business, losing farmers and being at a risky time in farming, losing open land, and what that effect is on rural communities. And sitting here in Canaan in our newly renovated theater, it's really important that you really see how that affects everything else. And I just was wondering if the panelists had any comments on that. Briefly.
Since I get to speak last,
maybe you have a minute.
So our vet that services our dairy, so obviously when a cow gets sick, we don't load her on a trailer and bring her to the vet comes to us. And so that vet practice used to be able to maintain his practice within a 10-mile radius of his office. Today, that's a 60-mile radius. So this corner of Connecticut is a special place. Nowhere else in the state, except for maybe one corner of the Northeast, has the abundance of dairy farms still actively working. So the fact that on one little stretch in East Canaan, like boom, 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 there's 3 farms, and then just down in Canaan Valley, there's another one. Like that community is such a unique tenant to this space. And even though like there's a lot of, we all run independently, there's a wide range in scale from 40 cows to 1,400 cows, but that diversity and scale is so essential to our access to having that vet being able to continue to service our area, having the tractor sales still available to us and the seed sales. So like very much to Will Harris's point, that basic maintenance, that carrying capacity of having the diversity of farms ends up really benefiting everyone. And it creates a lot of opportunity when you have it. We don't need to all be farming the same way, but by just being here and needing a tractor to still work each day, we end up relying on the same service providers. So it's so important that, you know, when we can, with our dollars or our vote, make sure that we're supporting the people that are in this community. And sometimes it does require an extra trip, right? Like you could just get everything from Amazon now, but that's having zero impact on the people that are maintaining and supporting, you know, the landscape that we really, I mean, is such a big reason for why we live here.
Peter, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, only to say I've heard that echoed from other farmers that are worried that their tractor supply place is going to go out of business, and then they'll have to drive forever to get the feed or the things that they need, you know. But other than that, for the restaurants, I mean, we've noticed a huge change in our community, other than retirement communities being named after farms. You have just a whole demographic change in our area. Fewer kids, a lot of older people. It's, you know, sometimes it's great for the restaurant business, but other times it's not great for your community. You know?
Right, good point. So in closing, I just wonder if you could just, what's the one thing you hope people take away from this afternoon?
No, I think the one thing would be to, you know, continue to support local agriculture. I was really heartened. We had lunch this afternoon with David and 2 students from the local, from Busansky's VOAG program, and learned about Envirothon and the different things they're doing there. I feel really lucky that we have Housatonic and have a VOAG program locally. I feel really lucky that we have a thriving dairy industry, and honestly, I think our whole agricultural economy here in southern New England really hinges on our local dairy industry. So I would say, yeah, find ways to support your local farms, and you know, and all the different types of farms that we have locally. We have quite a diversity of different farms to be able to support.
So I've had an opportunity to travel to different places to speak at Women in Ag conferences, and this is such a unique ecosystem where we live. It is not appropriate to go and stand in front of a room of Nebraska women farmers and tell them about value-added production and setting up a farm market like my mom has, because they're in a community with 150 people. Like, you know, so like we live in a place where I think Connecticut has the highest dollar value in sales of direct-to-consumer agricultural sales. So what a unique opportunity for farmers, if only they could afford the land to be here, right? But this is an incredible diverse ecosystem with meat and dairy and honey and maple. I mean, you name it, like it's here. And know that you vote with your dollars. If you came to this, I feel like you already know that. I'm speaking to the choir, but like it makes a difference. It makes a real difference.
Peter, anything you'd like to add?
Well, I must say, I really love this movie. So I would encourage people to, get your friends to watch it. I thought, I've just watched it twice this week now, and I find that the concept of not necessarily making some of these new farmers bigger, but just reproducing them across the country in that, in that scale, it was, I found really fascinating. And those people are just inspirational. The guy from White Oaks Farm is just, it really brings tears to your eyes. And we're a family business. My son works for us at the Southfield store, and it really resonates, the family aspect of running the business, whether it's a farm or a restaurant.
Nice, thanks. Well, I'm going to turn it over to Pat for questions from the audience.
Thank you, everybody. We are going to do our Q&A a little differently from how we normally do. We're going to ask people who have a question to just kind of come over to this aisle and line up, and you can ask your question to the panel. And while you're doing that, I do want to thank, Dan mentioned that we had David Moran and 2 students from Housatonic Valley Regional High School. As many of you probably know, it has a very large agricultural program. And we really enjoyed listening to 2 sophomores in high school discuss in a very sophisticated manner many of the issues that we touched on in this panel. So it was terrific. If anybody has a question, please come on down and you can use this mic. I see a gentleman.
There was attention in the film to regenerative farming, and there was some discussion also here. But I'm wondering, observing even here with high land values, land degraded by past unsustainable ag practices, invasives, displacing native plants and biological activity plummeting. What percentage of farms by acreage, not by numbers, are actually being run with regenerative farming as a driving principle when there appears to be just a battle to survive, and the lowest cost leads to perhaps the worst practices? So where do we stand? Could this area, with Amanda's point about being such a unique ecosystem, could we drive attention to practices that could spread more widely from the peculiarity of this area?
I guess I'll start on that one. I think you make some really important points, and I think there's a number of us, BAV and our partner organizations, that are doing a lot on that front, including American Farmland Trust. There's been a pretty intensive focus on soil health.
I don't think we have any more questions. I do want to first of all, thank the Colonial Theater and its staff. They have been terrific in helping us set all of this up. And join me in thanking the panel. This has been terrific. Thank you all for coming. See you in March.